Me and a Kit Kat. What are we doing? What are we doing today, Tim?
We're going to continue to chip away at our bark.
Getting our money's worth out of this, aren't we?
For sure.
Do the really YouTubey bit where you say, if you want to see what else we've done with this, we'll put a card up in the corner. No, not even. Put up that corner and say,
if you want to see what else we've done with this, click here.
Yes. What a pro YouTuber.
I'm breaking pieces off. I've got some pieces ready to go. And we're just keeping the nice sort of rough live edge. Breaking it off where it's a little bit crumbly, like if there's a little bit like that. You know, we want it to be fairly sturdy, but I want this nice live edge to be the natural rock, so we don't want any flat edges facing up. There can be a flat edge facing down, because that's where it's going to get glued to the base, but this is going to turn into a bunch of scatter rocks. Yeah, just to...
going to keep the curve of the rock.
I don't know what kind of rocks are called where it's coming up out of the, you know... Ding.
I don't know. Right. Oh, you're demanding editing there, right? We've got some other bits that are going in.
So we're going to use a bunch of found objects. We've got some thrift store finds. We've got some little Reapers from Michael's.
This was a Halloween decoration.
Yeah, 2 for 1. Even before Halloween, you can still get the sales.
You can this year.
Yeah.
Nobody's buying any Halloween decorations.
They're panicking a little bit, I think.
So this is your Halloween episode.
Oh, we can do better than this.
So each of the 3 sets of rocks we're making today does have a statue involved with it as well, but we decided to save those for a future episode. We're going to go in depth about how to paint different types of statues, so you'll see those later on. But you'll see them pop up through this video as we figure out how these rocks are going to go down. So again, we're using the cork bark that we bought last week for the hills. We've got a few more things we want to do with it as well. Really useful bit of kit, and as Tim said, check out that other video for more about it. We've also got some Egyptian statues here as well that we're going to do a sandy texture on. We're not going to be covering those in this video. Again, stay tuned for a how to paint statues video coming soon. But first things first, we need to get some bases ready for all of the different rock textures. As usual, we're using hardboard here, and we're going to be cutting them on the trusty bandsaw. And not only have we labelled each base here, we've also labelled the bottom of the rocks, so as we can cut them all out in one big pile and then go back and know where each one sits. I'm afraid we're using hot glue, but we're sticking them down onto each one. We're making them so they're slightly off centre. The actual rock is going towards one side of the base. That's so that we can build up the base with a bit of texture and in some cases some foliage, but we've got a bit of a hard edge where miniatures can sort of sit up against it and use it as cover, whereas if you had the rocks in the middle, you'd have a lot of messy stuff around the outside and the miniatures wouldn't really be able to get up close to them. A quick sand down of the edges of all of those bases, nothing really crazy here, just a little bit of sanding with a block, just to get rid of all the little burrs that cutting the hardboard produces. And then it's to our trusty spackle. We're starting off with a new tub of it, and we're not actually going to be dyeing this stuff. Normally we would dye some spackle with like a wood stain to give it a brown colour, you can see just in the background there, but we're starting off with one set as the fresh white that it comes as, because they're going to be our snowy textured ones, so the white coming through underneath the snow text later on is actually going to be doing us some favours. But then on the middle set here that we're doing here, this is just going to be like a general grassland set, so it's just taking a little bit of spackle. It's mostly being used to fill the gaps where the cut cork bark doesn't quite fit neatly against the base, but then also a little bit of definition there, a little bit of pulling up into the rock just gives it an added bit of texture and a little bit more realism. And then with the third set, the jungle set, again we're using that brown spackle and kind of having it a slope somewhere between the two. It doesn't have the big slope that the snowdrifts has, but it's a little bit more than the relatively flat grassland, again just to give it a little bit of a change in definition. The only one that gets real special treatment here then is our little Halloween-y ghost statue, I guess. I don't know what it's meant to be really. It's a Grim Reaper with wings, which is pretty cool. But we've got some little offcuts of chipboard here that we're just gluing down with some super glue. All different shapes and sizes placed down. We're going to make these look like old paving slabs. Once they're all glued down, you're going to be pretty generous with some spackle over the top of them. And you want to make sure it goes into all of the cracks and the gaps, almost like you're tiling a bathroom or something. And then once it's all on, with a slightly damp finger, you're going to go in and remove a fair bit of it off the top of the tiles. Some of it can stay there, it can be a little bit messy. When that dries, it's going to look really good. All of the rocks then get primed with a black primer, and then on top of the black, they get a nice grey spray. You're going to let a few bits of the black stick through in the shadows and the recesses. All the different terrain types here, though, are all going to get that black and then grey. First up, the Grassland Rocks get themselves some dry brushing using various shades of light brown and grey. We do the same for the Jungle Rocks, but then we're going to take some of the camo shade paint from Citadel, I can't remember the proper name, and dab it around. Then at the base of the Snowy Rocks, we're going to use a really icy blue just to bring up a little bit of that sort of snowy texture up into the rock. And then we're also using it to just paint the rim there as well to keep it all nice and neat. The bases of the Grassland and the Jungle Rocks get themselves a nice foresty green base colour that we're going to attach some flock to. You can pretty much slap this stuff on. We're only really having to take a little bit more time and detail on this one here with the stones sticking out. But again, we're going to be adding flock to this one too. Once all that's dried, we're going to use some slightly watered down PVA and a combination of a few different flocks to create the base. If you want more information about the flock we're using and how we're adding it, you can check out this video up in the corner. For the Grassland Rocks, we're using a lighter selection of flock, and for the Jungle Rocks, we're using a slightly darker selection to give it more of that sort of foresty floor vibe. The Grassland ones are pretty much done, but just so they don't really look like stark rocks sticking out of grass, we're using a little bit of moss here from the craft store to just break up that hard line. Just a little bit of super glue and then sticking it in. Tim's got some crazy old rug. Silver.
This is a sheet of grass tufts that you have to cut yourself. So they're less convenient, but there's a whole lot more of them, but they're a whole lot more expensive because this is like a really specialty trained.
Specially trained?
Specialty trained.
Oh, sorry. It's like it's trained?
This is trained to be the best looking grass possible.
Yeah, this is for like HO scale type trained stuff, right?
I don't know if you can you see the height variation?
Bring it in. Let's have a look.
And then this stuff also has some ink going on.
A bit, yeah. Ooh.
You see that line of the raised?
Yeah. So it's good if you want to do some slightly larger areas, right? Rather than using little spriggy tufts, I guess.
That's not really what our hobby is about.
No.
We're going to use little tiny bits of this to be little bushes.
Okay. And this video is not sponsored by Tim Hortons, by the way. So I just totally zoomed in on that cup behind you.
Yeah. Sprues, these come from the dollar store. I've sprayed them a little greener, make them a little less shiny. Then I've clipped them off into individual little sprigs. So that's one bush we're going to use. The other thing is kind of this fern-looking object. I'm going to cut the end off. And I found if I cut it into about 2, it still works really well. And then if you give it like a half twist, it tends to come out a little bit more bush-like, whereas these will look like a little fern. And then also from the dollar store, I don't know what this is called. Well, it's wool, but it's
got quite a lot coming off it, right?
Yeah, it's got like a one-directional, I don't know, I think it looks like vines, so I've cut some pieces. So those are going to go up the rock. And then the last thing we're using is just some moss. And this is also from the dollar store. And as you can see, this stuff's a bit crumbly. That's why we don't use it a lot.
Yeah.
But how we're going to use it to sort of hide our glue and hide the crimes is going to work pretty well.
Again, with some super glue, using that wool or yarn to create the vines. The case here really is to follow the cracks of the rock as the vines would in real life. And then for the base foliage, we're going to use the hot glue gun again. But actually, it's a really good use for it this time. Probably the first use that I can't really think of another way of doing this. You're going to make yourself a big pile of hot glue and then basically stick the plants in, again, using the combination of all the different aquarium style planting we've got here. And then again, some of that moss, literally just stick that over the top. The moss is going to hold everything up. It's going to cover up the glue that you've not particularly used. And then once it's starting to dry, you can pick away that moss so there isn't want so much of it hanging around. Here's a better angle of it. So again, you're going to make yourself a nice big pile of hot glue. Yum, yum, yum. And then you're going to take a selection of your foliage and stick it in. The things that really help with this sort of foliage is using a different combination of types, so it doesn't all look the same. And also we found, unfortunately I haven't got any footage of it, but we found that if you give all of this a spray with matte varnish and take that shine away a little bit, it looks less like aquarium planting and a little bit more realistic. And again, you're going to take a little part of that moss, and you'll see here it just gets stuck in, and not only does it hold those plants up, but it covers up all of that nasty looking hot glue. And then once it starts to set, which is relatively quick, you can just sort of pull away the excess. Back over to the snow ones. We're really moving through stuff today, eh? And we're using some of the AK Terrain snow products. We actually did a video recently where we checked out a load of different snow products to see which one made the best snow looking bases ready for the Rime of the Frost Maiden, the new D&D campaign. If you want to check out how we felt about all the different products, you can check out this video here. But it's no surprise that we thought the AK ones were the best because we're using them again. We're using the snow relatively liberally across the base, leveling it out with brushes or popsicle sticks, basically whatever you've really got to hand. It doesn't really set very smooth, this stuff, so it is worth taking a bit of time to really smooth it all out as best as you can. And then on top of that, we're using some of the micro balloons from AK to give it that lovely powdery fresh snow texture. Make sure you do this over a bit of paper so that you can scoop up all of the stuff that falls away, because it should work again fine. Next, you're going to take some matte spray varnish and give it a light zenithal spray on the top of the rock, and then quickly sprinkle over some more micro balloons, and it will stick to all the ridges and the cracks there, just give that extra little bit of detail as the fresh snow is fluttered down onto the rock. Once it's all dried, you've got 3 great looking sets of terrain scatter, all using the same base material. Here's the grassland looking ones. They've gone straight down onto the table. Those hills there are the ones from a couple of projects ago. The jungle stuff looks really full and dense. Can't wait to paint that statue up in the jungle one. That's going to be really fun. And the snow stuff is cool and crisp. But there you go, 3 different sets of terrain, all from the same basic product. I hope you've enjoyed this one. Thank you so much for watching. If you have enjoyed it, make sure you give us a like. It really does help out. And keep it here with a subscribe for more from the Game Chamber.